Hey everybody, and welcome to another devlog video for the procedural city generator. Today I wanted to give you guys a status update on PCG and give you a behind the scenes look at where we are when it comes to features and how close we are to release. I know I've been getting a lot of questions on Discord, on email, on YouTube, asking me about an ETA, asking me about, hey, when is this going to get released? So today is going to be more of a casual, hey, I just want to talk to you guys and get your opinion as far as what do you think should be included, maybe should be postponed for a different version, update after release, etc. So if you guys have seen the last video I posted last night, silently because I didn't have any quiet time, I finally replaced all of the buildings on the spawner from my original placeholder buildings, which I'm sure you go back on the videos, you can see they're really crappy. Equivalent of programmer art, and I was just using it to test the code and everything. Finally with much nicer buildings. You guys can see here for the rural we have 3 different models. We have this little small boogaloo, this slightly bigger one, and finally we got this nice little house added I think 2 days ago, which makes it really nicely. Same thing for industrial. We have now like a little 2 industrial buildings here and with a 3rd one on the way. For commercial we have now 2 very nice apartment buildings that you guys can see here, and I've just added a few versions there. Same thing with his. We have a parking lot which right here it has a very low chance of spawning, which is why you see it here. We have the subway, and I believe we may have 1 or 2 more coming here, so a little bit more variety. For the residential, I think we're pretty much done here. We have, I believe, 4 different residential homes. You guys have seen this one before. This is the one that's been there kind of forever, but there's a couple more that in my opinion also look really nice. Very modern buildings here, and as you can see, there are no interiors. I have not yet converted the spawner code to use the new interior system, which is why on the demo yesterday there were no interiors. It's gonna take a bit of time, and also I need to take the time to decorate the houses with the furniture and kind of set everything up. So but the code is there. It's just a matter of getting that done. But if you see this, you'll be like, okay, well, what else is missing? What else are you thinking of doing before you get release this? So let me go ahead and share a little roadmap that I've been using here. This is by no means a full roadmap. I started using Trello very recently, maybe 2 months ago. Before that, I was just using a spreadsheet, a local spreadsheet. So obviously, not everything that I've done is here, but this is kind of a behind the scenes look of what I've been kind of thinking about. I've always told you guys that if you make a suggestion and I think it's a good suggestion and reasonable, I actually do write it down. So you can see here, let's just take a quick look at some of these suggestions that I've gotten from you guys, right? Ability to save the entire city to disk. It's an interesting suggestion, and the idea here is that maybe you build your city and then you want to have the same city in a different scene or level, where you want to instantiate the city multiple times. So that's an interesting idea. Something that I have to think about. Is definitely not coming on the initial release, but something that I may consider. Saving all of the different building positions and transforms and all of that stuff to disk, and then having the ability to load it later, right? That's pretty interesting. Ability to completely hide all city actors and players when they're far away. This is more of an optimization thing. Maybe right now with the addition of level streaming and the aggressive LODs, I think we're pretty good. But I still may look into this. Walkways between buildings. There's a specific person that asked about this. You know who you are. He's a big fan of aerial combat type games. He's actually making a game like that. So obviously having these obstacles and bridges between buildings is cool. I have to think about this. Railway system. This is kind of like, maybe have a train This is similar to the subway system, which by the way was also a suggestion. Subway was a little bit easier because I'm just doing teleporting right now, but even if I end up doing like an actual network, like a spline network, because it is underground, it wouldn't have to care about the actual city above, right? So it's a lot easier to do. This would actually imply having full railway network. And while this is very, very cool, this is very, very hard. So I'm going to leave it in the suggestions here. I didn't forget it, but I'm just kind of keeping it there. This is also some pretty cool suggestion. Have the building height being based on the location within the zone, right? And this is typically, if you look at the cities, the tallest building seems to be more towards the center, like in a commercial area, and then they tend to go down in height as they get to the edges, right? I've seen on YouTube some other devs do procedural city generators where they have like a little curve, and you can actually modify within the city like where the tallest buildings are. That's really cool, and that's definitely doable, but that would depend on how many buildings you actually have right now, right? Because we're adding buildings, we're not generating them at runtime. It's hard to have a really, really nice curve of like tall buildings to like lower height buildings. That would be a lot better if we were doing procedural building generation, right? There are a couple of projects out there of several community members that are doing that. So maybe when that's available, maybe this is going to be a viable option to do, right? Maybe pass this information to the building generator, and that way you have really, really nice control over the kind of the silhouette of your city, so to speak. Blending between zones. This is fairly new, but a very good suggestion. So basically what this is saying is, right now, well, you guys can't see it here, but if I come back to the different zones, you guys have seen this before, right? But basically we have very discrete zones, and each zone, like commercial, industrial, they're going to have their information, right? And right now, each zone actually has not just the square, but they actually have a, believe, a sphere. So you can see here as a bounding sphere, which I haven't really tested, but the idea is that you can either use bounds that are square, which is very kind of, you know, that's what I've been using all this time, or have the bounds on a sphere area. That will give you more interesting areas, right? So the commercial area here, if I hide these guys here, right now you can see it's very much a square, right? And this is where all the apartments are. If I had a circle, I think it would be a little bit more natural, right? So depending on the area, that is a really interesting idea. I do have it here, but I haven't tested. I need to make sure that it works. Another idea I've had is using a spline and creating a spline area. That is a little bit harder, but maybe doable. So then you can have irregular shapes. That would give you a lot more control. So for example, maybe you only want the commercial area to be inside this triangle here. Maybe you can just grab a spline and just kind of trace it out. So those are definitely ideas. The spline will probably not come for initial release. Probably I'll make sure that the circle and the square work. And remember, you can move these zones, obviously. Oops. You know, anywhere you want. You also are not limited to the default zones that I have here, which I have in a little drop down. You can create as many zones as you want. So you could technically have like 10 different zones for commercials with different buildings, and you can overlay them on top of each other. You can really go crazy here. But the idea is the same. It's just you need to lay out your zones. So blending between zones so there's not a hard edge. It's an interesting idea. I am in many ways already doing that, but not explicitly. And the last one here is random plot sizes per building. I actually was talking to one of the community members yesterday. I believe his name is Chris. And he was asking really interesting questions about, well, right now and you can see it here, right? It's a very valid criticism. If I go to like one of these more residential or rural areas, each house is very nicely spaced out, which is not realistic, right? And that's because I'm using a very simple distance. I call it building distance, right? So where is it here? So if I go to a building here, like the last house, Alden, you can see that we have a building buffer and a street buffer. The distance between the house and the street, and the distance between the house and other buildings. So that will be 1,500 from one side and 1,500 from the other. Right now, I just leave the default, which is why everything seems so square-like. But there are ways that I'm thinking about maybe adding some randomness, because it is true, houses aren't really built like this, right? So I have ideas of maybe adding a range instead of a building buffer, you know, kind of adding a min and max for both street buffer and building buffer. And you can say, instead of 3,000, maybe you can say between 2,000 and 3,000, right? And that'll add a little bit of randomness to your city. It's still fairly easy to add to the spawner, but it's all those little things, right, that make this look a little bit more natural. So specifically, different plot sizes, I think I can get there. Shapes of plots, that's going to be a lot harder, so I'm going to have to think about that a little bit. But nonetheless, it's here, right? It's in my radar. I'm going to have to think about it. Other things that started as suggestions that are now completed, you know, the helicopter, I think somebody suggested something about maybe having some of a flying vehicle. Subway system, which I have it uncompleted, start as a suggestion, by the way. Things like H-lot support. I was talking to a community member. He has a very, very nice modular city asset, and we were talking about optimization, and H-lot came up, and I said, hey, maybe add a very convenient way of adding H-lot support. So you can see here what's been done already, right? Clean up the project, that's kind of an ongoing thing. Add foliage, add a drivable car, add a helicopter. The UI, the props UI is there. Support for mega cities, this means mostly the level streaming and dividing the city in sections and having the ability to load and unload the neighbors. You've seen those videos. Create the door. This is fairly recent. Add a maximum number of spawns per building. You saw that in another video. A minimum distance check per building. This is really useful for things like the subway system, when you don't want the subway stations to be really close to each other. That's a suggestion that came from somebody on YouTube, by the way. I think 1 or 2 people made that comment on YouTube, and I was really liked it and added it there. You can see here that it's still a lot of stuff in progress. Like the elevator VP that you guys saw is not done yet. The overhaul to the inside VP to support buildings with multiple floors, I would say that's 80% there. I need to finalize it and add it. Improve the interior BP workflow, similar to that. Create the islands. You can see these things in red are what I call epic user stories. If you've ever done development on like one of these big IT companies and they're using agile methodology, they have this different naming conventions, right? So the reds are the things that I consider really hard, or big ticket items, right? The islands are hard for several reasons. And if I pick a plot here, let me just go ahead and delete this guy to show you. Right now, if I go to roads, you can see that I have a tab that is specifically for sidewalks, and I actually have the code to spawn the sidewalks based on the different roads. But the challenge here is it's very hard to detect and place the blueprint in the middle of the shape so the trace goes out nicely. Very hard. I haven't figured out a way to do it. And also, you probably don't want sidewalks on every part of the city, right? So maybe the commercial side of the city where there's big skyscrapers are, you do want those sidewalks, concrete sidewalks. But maybe in the rural area, if you're using a landscape, you want this to be just grass, right? So there's still a lot of things to do as far as the sidewalks. So I am right now thinking of maybe just having manual sidewalks for the initial release. I made some code changes to the sidewalks that you are now able to drop it. See if I can show you guys. You can see I have a manager here, but I've made code changes so that now you're able to just drop the blueprint, and because you're doing it manually, you can put it kind of in the middle, and then you can go down here to the utility and you can trace the shape location. Oops, let me go, and you can see here, go to game mode, how it traces and creates that shape with all the vertices. Then I go ahead and simplify the shape, which of course I have to improve the code, and then eventually I can generate the island, which right now has this like semi-transparent material, which just makes it easier to see the shape. But you can remove the construction mode and just basically put this material, and then you can just kind of manually adjust it here, so you can see. So obviously if you're doing this manually, then it's a lot easier to do, right? So right now, it's one of the considerations is, and you can see you can also adjust the height, is maybe for initial release, just to make sure that I can release this fairly soon, is just do it manually, right? Wherever you want a one of these sidewalk islands, you can just drop the blueprint. It does take more time, obviously, but it's more doable. If I remove this, for example, you see this is a slightly more complex shape. You can just kind of quickly do it here. Come down here, I trace it, I simplify it, I generate it, and I remove the construction mode. And I will be making more changes to the code to trace the shape better. So you can see the whole point is to simplify the spline points, but to leave the corners intact. So my code to detecting corners is kind of wonky right now. But you can still see, I mean, even though it does take time, if I wanted to put sidewalks on all of this, it would probably take me about 10 minutes, right? So it's like, okay, I could release this and have, at least for initial release, the ability to add these things manually. It'll probably add you maybe 15-20 minutes, depending on the size of your city, to make it nicely where you want it. Or I could spend maybe one more month trying to figure out a better way to do this, right? So those are the kinds of questions that I have, and I'm really interested in hearing you guys' opinion, right? A lot of you guys are really kind of excited and wanting to get your hands on this, and trust me, I really do want to release it, but I also want to make sure that whatever I release is you know, decent, it's not buggy, because then rightfully so you guys are going to complain and say, hey, this is not working right. So I have to be really careful as to what I include. Landscape modification is another big one, and obviously I know that's there. I have really old code for modifying the landscape. And if you guys will go way back, maybe almost a year ago, when I was like the third or fourth video, I was showing some landscape modification. And because I'm using splines here, it is easy to flatten the terrain or have these roads kind of do a contour on the terrain. So that's still there, but there's still a lot of different things that I need to do to make it look nice. You'll notice also that each building has a spline. You'll wonder, what the heck do I need a spline for, right? Each individual building, if I go to game mode, has a spline, and that spline is there so you can flatten the terrain among the building, right? So say that this was a landscape and this has all these irregular things. When I plop this building here, it'll flatten the landscape from this point to this point with a fall off, and you can see here that I have the settings for the landscape and the start with and the fall off, right? Including the ability to set up a landscape layer. So maybe in your landscape you have like one of the layers is like dirt, or maybe gravel, or whatever it is where you want your buildings to be, and then you can apply that layer on that plot, right? So all of that stuff is there, but I haven't touched that code in months because I've been focusing on other stuff. At some point I have to go back and refine the code and make sure that you can actually use this properly in a landscape, right? But it's still a big ask, which is why it's still there in progress. You'll see that there's still some buildings that are coming up. These are the yellow stuff. I consider the residential and rural houses to be done. If I get more, obviously that's awesome. That's icing on the cake. But my goal was to have at least 3 different buildings per zone to kind of showcase variety. If I have more, that's even better, obviously. But at the end of the day, I am relying on volunteers, mostly one person actually doing all of these buildings, which I try to thank him as often as I can, but I can't thank him enough because I don't have time nor the ability to do something like this. I'm not an artist, right? And this has full interiors. That's the amazing thing, right? If you guys have seen the video, this is not just the husk. These are full proportional interiors with stairs. Some of these guys have elevator shafts, like this guy right here, which I'm going to use my elevator blueprint. So knowing that somebody else is taking care of the assets allows me to do the coding. But at the same time, it's just one person and it takes a lot of time. And he's doing this on his free time as a volunteer. So I've made a video like this before asking for help. If you are an artist, or you know how to use Blender really well and texture and whatever, and you want to volunteer, I am still open to help. We still need more road props and things like that. Reach out to me if you would like to help. But right now I am mainly relying on one person, so I think we're getting close to the final number of models for the city that I would like to ship this with. So thank you so much. Again, you know who you are. I'm not gonna call you out. But one or two more commercial, maybe one more industrial, and then I need to populate all those buildings with interiors with the new system, which does take a lot of time, but that is going to make a huge difference, right? One of the key things that I want to make sure that PCG has is support for full interiors for big buildings. That includes an elevator that will be able to take you anywhere, or the stairs, and no matter where you go on the floor, only that floor will have the props spawn to keep performance high, but at the same time giving you the ability to have proper, true scale-wide cities with interiors. So that's my goal, right? And you can see here things that I haven't even started yet. And by the way, a lot of this stuff I moved to future updates. I had to do a cleanup earlier this week. I was thinking, hey, what else can I do? But I'm thinking, okay, I need to start moving things out of that initial release. Park UI, I need to do that. If you have the procedural park asset that I've released, that actually started as part of the old PCG, and I decided to make it its own asset and actually develop it properly. It started as this little spawner here that you guys saw in the video, literally just an area that spawns foliage, and obviously the main thing is that it'll avoid roads and houses and things like that, right? So it automatically avoids all the right things. All you need to do is just kind of put it in the area that you want it to be more wooded or whatever. It'll automatically spawn the trees properly. You can see here that there's still bugs, right? It didn't detect this road for whatever reason, so you still have to kind of work on it. But this spawner turned into the park, the actual procedural park, and my intention is to fully when this ships, if you have the procedural park or you want to add parks to your cities, that they'll be fully compatible, including, and you can see here there's even a placeholder here, a editor UI that you can just add here. So right now the park doesn't have that. I do plan to update the park with a UI, its own UI, not as elaborate, just one panel, and then you'll be able to add that same panel here, which I don't even know how it's going to look, but probably it's going to have the option to spawn a park and you can just move it. And everything that you do on those buttons on the park, those utilities, you'll be able to do here on a nice interface. So you don't have to ever touch the actual actor blueprint. You can do everything from creation all the way to foliage, and even having some bonus stuff on this plus, like the H slot. And you can see there's Apex Destruction support. Chaos, there's a placeholder. I probably will not do that for initial release, but that was my plan, by the way. If you go back here, you'll see that I have chaos on the future, add chaos destruction options, and VP for single actors and hierarchical instant static mesh actors. I really wanted to do it. The reason I don't think I'll do it for this initial release is chaos is not available by default. You have to have you have to build the engine by source. And that is a step that I know a lot of people don't want to take or not sure how to do it. It's not that hard, but I have a feeling that most people will not have access to chaos. So should I delay this a month more to add chaos really nicely when most of you guys won't have it, right? So that's probably why I'm delaying chaos to a future release. But pretty soon, maybe 425, who knows, chaos will come out of beta or alpha or whatever, and then it'll be available on the vanilla version of Unreal, and that will be the perfect time for me to add it, right? So the placeholder's there. I just have to have access to chaos and make sure that I build nice blueprints to make it really, really convenient. Other things that are delayed for the future, and I say possible, right? None of this is a promise, by the way, is additional road generation algorithms. The one I'm using right now, I feel like is pretty robust, because you can select how curvy you want your roads. So if you go, for example, to auto roads here, there's an advanced settings section, which I don't think I ever showed, but this was available as part of the utilities and settings on the road manager. And you can see that for every type of road, you have generation presets that I've made here. Things like organic, grid-like, mild curves. You have a spawn method, which I think I'll remove that for the initial release. Spawn density, how many, right? And chance to spawn from minor and side row, 75%. So even just with this panel, you have a lot of flexibility. Right now, everything is grid-like, which is why you see all the straight roads. But you can create very, very different road networks just by kind of playing around with these settings. So don't feel like the city is going to be this blocky. You can generate very, very different things. Actually, I might as well just show you guys. Let me just remove this real quick. Since again, this is a more casual video. Sorry, this is taking too long, I know. But I wanted to kind of show you guys, since I have you here. This is, you know, kind of what it looks like if I were to remove all of the roads, right? And I just have the things here. If I were to come here and say, hey, for the main roads, instead of grid-like, I want mild curves. If I go back here and I say generate the connecting roads, you can see that now we have curves. Generate the main roads. Now you can see that we have more curves here, right? So the settings are there, right? You can see that it's not necessarily all grid-like. You can go heavy curves, which is just presets, by the way. If you really wanted to really customize it, you can go to the road manager itself and actually tweak those values. I personally thought you see more curves, that having you know, but the more curves you have, kind of the more challenging it becomes, right? And then if I go to minor rows, they're grid-like, and the side rows are grid-like. So maybe this is going to be, well, maybe the default here, which is mild curves, I think. You can see that the city is going to look very, very different. Oops, I forgot something here. I need to remove this generator out. This is causing problems. Let me remove all the roads and try again. This is causing problems that spawner with the roads not really detecting collision properly. Oops. Reset batch. Sorry, I didn't really mean to showcase the algorithms here, but just might as well since we're talking about it, right? But all of this is still one algorithm that is calculating the roads, and all those settings are basically telling the spawner how curvy the roads are going to be, how big are the sections. So you can see that now you have a very different city, and if I go to buildings and I start spawning buildings, right, it's going to look very different just by the fact that the roads themselves are different. And don't forget that these are splines, right? So let me just go down, oops, go down here. So you can see now that the design is much, much different. And these are splines. So you know, before you spawn buildings, you can grab the splines and change the roads to suit your needs exactly how you want them, right? So it's still all one algorithm, which I think is still very versatile, but it's still one, right? So can I make different algorithms? And if you wanted to make a city that is a perfect grid, like New York City, this algorithm doesn't give you a perfect city because it's using percent chance to spawn, for example, for some side roads and minor roads. So there's still limitations, right? So this is kind of a possible future thing, is different algorithms to create road networks that are different shapes. Chaos is there, runtime city spawning. You could technically do some of that, but honestly, the algorithms that I have right now are very, very heavy because I'm doing so many checks, which is why I do batching. You can see the little batch numbers. So runtime city spawning will not be supported on the initial release. I have to really think about how I want to do that. If I wanted to do runtime spawning, it would probably make sense to spawn on player proximity. How do you do that? Right now, I'm not set up for that. So possibility to use textures to create a city layout. This is really, really neat. Basically, if you import a picture or a texture, use that texture to define something on the city. And some spawners have that, and that's really, really nice. And I have an idea of how to do it. I have some sample code, but this is still going to be a pretty big deal if I decide to go that route. Seed-based building generation, another idea that came up talking to a community member. He actually posted on the showcase a couple of days ago. He also has his own city generator blueprint, I think, or maybe he's using C++. Regardless, he has his own city generator, and he's using seed-based generation, which is really neat. I'm not. By using seeds, it means that you have some predictability, right? If by using a static seed, you always get the same random layout, that means that if you find a layout that you like, you can save the seed, and then you can generate the exact same layout later, right? And this may go hand in hand with the ability to save the entire city to disk. That may be easier. If I can regenerate the city by using different seed values, then all I would have to do is save the seed values to disk. And then when you load it, quote unquote load it, all I would have to do is just regenerate the city again by using the seed values, and you'll have the same city, right? So this and this are kind of tied together, I would think. It will be easier. And add city presets, that I am still debating whether I want to do it, and it would be like between not started and future. But the idea here would be that maybe you have specific layouts that you want to save. So maybe you have layouts of your different zones, like the rural zone and whatever. So maybe a combination of a layout of zones and settings for the roads would be like a preset, and then you can have maybe, I don't even know where, I guess in the creation tab or somewhere, you'll have like a drop down with all of the different presets, and that would help you quickly create different types of cities, right? So maybe a preset you can have like a New York, I don't know, you can call a preset New York, right? New York City, and that preset would have grid-like streets, and the zones would be in a very, you know, like square manner versus something like, I don't know, like European city or something. The streets would be a lot more curvy. Maybe the zones will be circle based or spline based, whatever, right? So maybe having that ability would be really nice and will speed up your workflow. But right now I'm thinking that's probably coming in the future, but it's there, it's an idea, right? And I still have a couple of things that I still haven't done yet. Add multiplayer support for blueprint code. That's an epic you see there. You don't really need, you know, for the generator, this is all happening at editor time. So this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with multiplayer. You're generating the city, and then if you're using multiplayer, then this is the city that all of the clients get. But the blueprints like the car and the elevator and things like that, it would be really nice if that was also multiplayer supported. So that's my plan, is to do a pass on those simple blueprints. So if you load this on a multiplayer project, then obviously you have the static city, but everything else like the helicopter and the cars and all the interactive stuff will be multiplayer ready. And I know multiplayer is super, super important for a lot of people. So I still do intend to have that before I release, and I haven't even started doing that because I don't even have the final blueprints and how I want them to work. Roads are the other big one, and that's the last thing I'll talk about. I know this is going on really, really long. Sorry about that, guys. But the roads are a challenge, right? So right now, because I want to keep as much flexibility as possible, these rows are splines, and you notice that between one section and another, these are big sections. A section is the area between the two spline points, right? These sections are really, really big. And if I go out of construction mode, you can see that I have this material here that looks like, you know, like a road material, but it is very much an overlapping and it's not stretched. And that's because I'm using, I forget what the name is now in the texture, world aligned textures, I think is the name. But that poses a problem for having a road like the modular road tool, which has, which instead of having these long sections, they divide sections into tiny segments because the texture for the segments has the line markings. If I put a texture right now on the street that has the markings, it'll be completely stretched out. So that is a challenge. If I do it the way that MRT does it, it will be very, very heavy on performance, extremely heavy on performance. So I don't necessarily want to do that. I like this way of doing it because it keeps performance light. If I do it the other way, then it's going to be a lot easier to add the textures that looks like a city, but then it'll be very heavy on performance, and you'll absolutely will need to convert these splines into meshes. And the way you would do it is you'll use the merge actors tab here, tool, and you see that every segment is like a separate, you can see the nodes, the spline mesh components, and you can then merge these actors and convert this to a single mesh. So you still want to do that for your final city, but again, how do I make this irregular shape still have markings at regular intervals? If you guys know, please do let me know, because I'm not sure myself, quite frankly, how I want to do that yet. I would love to get some suggestions on this. The other idea I've had is to use decals. That seems kind of awkward, honestly, but leave it as is with these really long sections, and then just add a decal actor, which is going to be another spline, and that decal actor is just going to have the lines kind of going regularly. So this is one thing that I still have to figure out how to do it. Also, how am I going to handle intersections? That's another thing that I haven't figured out yet. Typically you want like the little lines here, and maybe a stop sign or a light, right? That tells you that you can go, right? So those are the things that are still kind of up in the air. I haven't decided what the best way of doing that. And if you have any ideas, please do let me know, because that's still something that I haven't figured out yet. And I think that's pretty much it, guys. Sorry, this is going to be a long video, but I wanted to give you kind of an idea of where I'm at. You can see that there's a lot of stuff completed, but there's still a lot of stuff that's still a work in progress. Some of this stuff doesn't take too long, but some of this stuff may, depending on how I decide to go. And you can see here that there's still some stuff that need to be started. So there's still you know, a list of things that I need to get done. So again, please be patient. I am doing this on my free time at nights, and I'm also balancing my other assets, obviously, like ABK, which has an update coming very soon, and obviously support. Every day I got you know, a few emails and DMs of people asking for help, which obviously that's just the way it is if you're a marketplace creator. So I am doing this as fast as I can. This is my main project. I really want to get these out to you guys, but please be patient. I'm going through this. Now you've seen kind of what the roadmap looks like, give you an idea of kind of where we are. Again, if you want to help and you want to volunteer, by creating some assets. We could still use some help with maybe some props, and mainly suggestions would be really, really good. What do you think about my plan? Do you think maybe some things that I have there could still be moved to a separate release, or maybe there's something that I have for a future release that you absolutely need to have and you think I should have in the initial release? Let me know in the comments below, email or DMs on Discord, or just comment on the video. Obviously, I really want your feedback on this. I am taking, as you can see from the Trello board, a lot of suggestions, so I do listen to what you guys have to say. I want to make sure that when this is released, you guys are getting the best, most applicable generator that you can use. And obviously, like with all my products, I do have a roadmap, plans to continue to support this. So even after the initial release, I do plan to continue adding more and more stuff based on feedback. So just like ABK, which I'm still adding updates a year later, it's gonna be my plan to do this for PCG. So yeah, that is pretty much it, guys. Thank you for hanging on. If you're still here, thanks for listening. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you in the next video.